And I believe we're alive.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the first out of two presidential debates here in the season 33 presidential election in MEC. I'm Ivor, as everyone I'm sure knows, and I'll be joined tonight by my fellow moderator, Ben Holophile. We are in the Wisconsin Field House at the University of Wisconsin-Madison in, yes, Madison, Wisconsin.
Tonight's debate will be broadcasted by the Congressional Review and will have a duration of roughly 90 minutes. Without further ado, let us meet the candidates who will make their case to be the next President of the United States, from left to right on your screen. First, the Democratic nominee, former Speaker of the House and current District 6 Representative, Monique Henderson of the Commonwealth of Virginia in Caesarea. And the Republican nominee, incumbent President of the United States, Roman Thaddeus of Texas in Jefferson.
All right, thank you, Ben. Now, we are supposed to make you aware of the rules both of the candidates and their campaigns have agreed to. Every candidate gets 1 minute and 30 seconds for opening and closing statements. For every respond, candidate gets the same amount of time. For rebuttals, every candidate gets 45 seconds, and any candidate can follow up unlimited number of times, although it is becoming an open discussion after 5 or more follow-ups are made by all of the candidates combined together. You can follow up to any answer unless it is an opening or a closing statement. The order of questioning shall be decided by the website random.org. However, the line of answering the questions shall change from question to question. For example, candidate A shall speak first, then candidate B, and then again candidate A, then again candidate B. And that is how they shall take turns. Any candidate can ask once in the entire debate for a 3-minute break before the question has been asked, and after all the answering and follow-ups have been done. The candidates shall not interrupt each other nor the moderator. We are specifically underlining that. If the candidates go out of their time, they will be either interrupted by the moderator or they will hear the sound of the timer, which is going to be controlled by my colleague tonight, Ben Holophile.
All right. Okay. So the first are opening statements, which will last 1 minute and 30 seconds for each candidate. Mrs. Henderson, as the challenger, will speak first. Mrs. Henderson?
Good evening. First, I want to thank Ben and Eva for hosting the debate, and thank Mr. President for attending. Good evening. I'm D6 representative and candidate for President Monique Henderson. I've been proud and privileged to serve as your Secretary of Defense, Secretary of Education, a Cesare Supreme Court Justice, a Heartland legislator, representative of D6 and D7, and Speaker of the House. I've spent my life fighting for children and families and trying to make life easier for working Americans, and fighting to make a more transparent government. As Secretary of Defense, I work to increase our alliances and create a military that represents our values. As Secretary of Education, I work to limit the amount of children in one class at one time in order to reduce overcrowding and invest in our public schools. As a representative, I work to create a campaign finance system built to last and one built for transparency. I also work with President Sanders, President Fitzgerald, President Kirkman, and President Thaddeus to make an economy that works for working families. I work to create a government built to fight corruption and protect those who expose the lies and corruption of companies, including our own government. So as you can see, I have a long track record of fighting for our families, and that's why I'm running for president. I'm running to protect and defend Americans and American values on the global stage. I'm running to fight for our active duty service members and veterans and their families. I'm running to protect the rights of every American citizen, no matter their national origin, religion, race, ethnic background, or anything else. I'm running to represent all Americans and bring this country together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. Now, Mr. Thaddeus, your opening statement.
Thank you, Ben. Tonight, as our economy rebounds from the worst effects of the stagflation crisis caused by the failed and disastrous Medicare for All bill, and caused by deficits covered up as surpluses for electoral gain, Our administration fixed our budgets, we fixed our healthcare, and we're on the right track for the future. Tonight proves why we must remain steady and re-elect this administration. It is this administration that ended Monique and Ben McKay's healthcare baby, this administration that made our budgets honest, set our gun law straight, and achieved the small government vision I aspired to when I first ran a season ago. And because of this, my opponent lacks a message of why she should win, and more importantly, why we should lose. My opponent has ideas, I'll give her that. Ideas like increasing taxes and even doubling some of them, a bad move in an economy badly needing supply. Yet presents no reasons why we have not earned another 8 weeks after our previous 8 weeks of hard work and effort. In fact, this was an administration she publicly approved of until it came time to run for president. Tonight, I hope for a good discussion of the kitchen table issues with Monique and the moderators to show you that we must re-elect a hard-working administration that has done nothing to warrant its replacement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thaddeus. Ivor?
And yeah, now we are continuing this debate, obviously, onto the questions. The candidate to answer first to each question will alternate after each question, and a random coin toss has determined that Mr. Thaddeus will answer first to the following question. Ben?
Yes. Our first topic is the law, governance, and ideology. Our first question of the night is, what do you consider your ideology to be, and what are its shortcomings and benefits? Mr. Thaddeus, you go first.
Thank you, Ben. I remember answering this question at the last season's debate, and I would give the same answer now. I'm a libertarian. I believe that's in a smaller government and limited government that gets off of people's backs. I don't believe in a large federal government. I believe that we have to stick by our Constitution and our principles and make sure that the states and the provinces, which I have fully and wholeheartedly supported the rights and expansions of their abilities to make their own choices. Our administration is, and how I've governed this country is through that perspective, through smaller government, lower taxes, less regulations, less intervention in our economy, and less intervention in our social lives. I don't think that it's the government's business to stick their nose in every damn thing that comes across. It's not the government's job to micromanage. It's not the government's job to raise incredibly high oodles of taxes to pay for oodles of benefits, which I think have clearly failed, as we have seen from past programs that have passed MEC. And we've seen that from the economic crisis that we've had that was caused by this balloon of spending. In fact, the very economic crisis that Americans are dealing with today was caused by the large and increasing size of the federal government. As we increased our spending, inflation doubled. That was the actions of the government, not the actions of free-wielding people and free-wielding provinces using their power to protect themselves. The ideology I believe in is libertarianism, and I proudly stand by that label today.
Thank you, Mr. Thaddeus. Mr. Henderson, Mrs. Henderson, I'm sorry, your response to that question?
Thank you for the question, Ben. So I'm a proud common sense Democrat. I believe that our government should be a government built for, by, and of the people of this country. We need a government that protects its most vulnerable, something that the Thaddeus administration has failed at doing. We need a government that invests in our public school system, something I have done repeatedly. We need a government that invests in our farmers, something I've laid out in my platform. We need a government that fights for working people of this country, which is my message in this campaign, and which is what I will do as president. We need a government. I'm fighting for a government built for, by, and of the people of this country. For far too long, we have seen politicians make promises and failed at those promises. For some reason, American politicians like to think that Americans don't pay attention to what they say. Newsflash, Americans pay attention. They hear everything we say. They hold us accountable, and that's why I believe we will win this election. So in summary, I'm a common sense Democrat who's fighting for common sense rules and regulations and fighting to put working families back on top where they belong.
Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. Ivor?
I would ask the candidates if they have any follow-ups so far.
Sure, I'd like to issue a follow-up.
All right, Mr. Thaddeus, you have 45 seconds, and I think that you're well aware of that by now.
Yes, sir. Let's look at our economy right now. It's an economy badly in need of supply, and it's badly in need of cutting restrictions on investments that grow our economy. Does a common sense Democrat have to support doubling the Wall Street tax, which, as we know from the flustering CBO report that we received during my administration of the false budgets of the many years before? We know that that tax had raised completely fallacious amounts of revenue. In fact, it's raising almost $100 billion less. And now, since it's not raising that revenue, we have to double it. That's just one example of what Monique may call a common sense policy, but in reality, it's going to hurt our economy, and it's going to not be able to create the investments we need to make our economy work, to make our economy be able to work for all classes of people, not the rich, not just the poor, but the middle class as well, who are badly suffering from their money becoming worthless because of the high inflation in this country.
Thank you, Mr. Thaddeus. You've gone over your time. Mrs. Henderson, would you like a rebuttal to that?
Sure. So first, I am not responsible for installing the Wall Street, the tax on stocks, bonds, and derivatives. However, I was in support of doubling it, something the Thaddeus administration actually did do once we entered the economic crash. They also took into consideration my idea to raise the corporate tax rate to a flat 10%. Now, I want to expand for a minute on what I meant by not keeping our promises. President Thaddeus promised to protect Social Security, yet he cut it by $90 billion. He promised to halt Chinese expansion into Africa. He failed. He promised to get term limits accomplished and failed. The president stated that his budget was honest, yet the moderators issued a scathing report.
Thank you, Mrs. Thaddeus. Mrs. Henderson, sorry. No problem. Mr. Thaddeus, would you like a rebuttal?
Oh, I'd love to talk about my budget. Yes, please. So if you want to talk about the issue of budgets, then go right ahead, because if I remember correctly, sure, we were able to pass a very bipartisan budget. The problem is that, you know why those numbers were off? It was because of your Medicare for All bill. You and Ben McKay told me that somehow Medicare for All would turn some sort of crazy profit, right? And I'm sorry, even from Medicare for All supporters would even agree that's absurd. You can't turn a profit on Medicare for All. So as soon as we knew these numbers and we got that information from the mods and the CBO, we were able to immediately correct our mistakes and execute the honest budget initiative. It is our administration that was able to fix our budgets and make them right, and it was the previous administrations of the past years since budgets have started that have misled the American people on our budgets.
Mr. Thaddeus, your time is up. Thank you. Mrs. Henderson, would you like a rebuttal?
Yes. So, Mr. President, you're just wrong. The UHA, the Universal Health Care Act, passed before your budget passed, which is a fact. You had time to analyze the spending increases in the UHA and to go back to your budget, reassess it, and fix the mistakes in it. You didn't do your homework. You fell on the job, and then you passed the budget. And then when the news network released that article, you blamed Democrats. Now, look, I've taken responsibility for the part I've played in the economic crash. It's time for the president and every other member of Congress who voted to pass the UHA and the budget to step up and take responsibility as well. Again, the president did not do his homework, and he is partly responsible for this economic crash, as is everyone who served in the August.
Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. Your time is up. Mr. Thaddeus, would you like a rebuttal?
Yeah, Monique, that's simply just not true. I hate to get into this back and forth, but remember those meetings that you and I and the Senate President pro tempore had, where you told me to disavow Andrew for having no idea about the mathematics of Medicare for All? You told me to disavow him, and of course he turned out to be completely right about the massive amounts of Universal Health Care Act spending. But you said that if I didn't appropriate this money, that there would be some sort of, that this budget would be much more difficult to pass, that perhaps that Democrats would not vote for it, which of course would entail a government shutdown if the Democratic House made it. So I don't know where you're getting these pointers from. As soon as that budget came up, which I did not know before I got the report, with the budget passed before the CBO report, and then we immediately corrected our mistakes. So I have no idea what you're talking about.
If I could respond,
Yes, it's now an open discussion, candidate. So yes, you can respond.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, yes, I remember those meetings, and I remember them quite well. And yes, I did say that Andrew's math was wrong, but
I was right.
I was referring to if we had implemented one of the three plans that I laid out to better finance Medicare for all. In fact, your own running mate has acknowledged that I am the only person who laid out three plans to better finance the program, all of which were ignored by your administration. And then again, you did not do your homework on the spending increases in the UHA and on the budget. You passed the budget, you wrote the budget, we passed it. The economy fell. We are all responsible for this. Not only that, I did say that if the funding was not appropriated, that we would not pass the budget. And let me tell you why. For this exact reason, I was convinced by your vice president and you yourself that it was important uh, to pass this budget, and that there would be later budgetary and economic steps taken to better finance this administration. Again, that did not happen. So, Mr. President, when are you going to take responsibility for the part you played in this, if you're going to take responsibility at all?
Oh, you know what my responsibility was in this? We passed a far better healthcare bill than the one that you passed with your Democratic House.
And that right there is the problem. You are blaming the other side. We are
Yes,
all
because it is your side.
we are all responsible.
I firmly believe that there will be more time to discuss this
Yes,
in
we
the
can
coming
we should move on to the
questions,
next
and
question.
we are moving on right now. Thank you for your input, candidates. So let's move to a topic which has been neglected in MEC for quite some time. On Thursday, the Honorable Michael Walker of Massachusetts was confirmed as a Supreme Court Justice and sworn in the day after. Now, the Supreme Court has 2 out of 5 members. The judiciary in MEC, in general, has an important role in the American government, as it is one of the 3 co-equal branches of government. As president, one has the capability to appoint to appoint members, if approved by the Senate, of the federal judiciary, especially the Supreme Court. Mrs. Henderson, how do you comment on President's nominees in his term, and what kind of nominees would you appoint if you became president, and why?
Well, I like all the president's nominees. This is one of the places where we agree. Judge Pittman has been an amazing. He served as an amazing governor. I have no doubt about his abilities on the court. Judge McCann has had a fantastic legal career and is an amazing and has had an amazing legal career and is great at analyzing the laws of this country and the Constitution. Um, Michael Walker, amazing pick for the Supreme Court. I have no doubt about his ability. But when I am president, I'm going to appoint someone to the Supreme Court who, and first I should say, when I appoint someone to the Supreme Court, their ideology means nothing to me simply because Supreme Court justices are supposed to be neutral in all political cases. So whether they be a registered Republican or Democrat, I'm going to appoint someone to the Supreme Court who will uphold the Constitution and who will not use partisan politics, who will not allow partisan politics to influence their votes.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Henderson. Just on time. Mr. Thaddeus, do you think that you have produced qualified nominees with the right view of the law, and given that there are still vacancies on the court, especially the Supreme Court, who, or generally said, what type of justices would you consider nominating to the court?
So first of all, I think that the Thaddeus administration has done a fine job at filling our judicial system that has been ignored for far too long. Look, we've appointed 3 judges to the court already, and if reelected, I want a 5-man Supreme Court. I think that we should go all the way and have that active, large Supreme Court. I think that as we've been filling these seats, we're seeing more cases pop up already. Sampson versus Caesarea, which I think is, whether or not what side of the case you are on, I think it's fair to say that we should be very glad that we're once again seeing an active judiciary in MEC, because that's what we need. Active judiciary, active community. That's what I would like to see. I'm glad that Monique supports these judges. And look, if we're talking about judges I want to nominate in the future, I think that if you have a qualified interpretation of the law, as Michael Walker, as Terrell McCann, as Bryson Pittman all do, then I think that is exactly the judges that we want. And I think that, quite fairly, this is another example of why we should not lose this election. We have done a fine job on the judicial front.
All right, thank you, Mr. Thaddeus. It seems to me that you're in agreement here, but are there any rebuttals? Doesn't seem so. So we're continuing to the last question of this segment. Mr. Thaddeus will go first. So the office, it's still the same topic, obviously. The office of President of the United States is an office which has been prefaced with history and integrity. What qualities, in your view, do you believe a president should exert during their tenure, and what qualities do you plan to exert if elected to the Oval Office?
I think the most important quality for any executive is leadership. Leadership is what gets a country through a time of strife. Leadership is what brings both sides to the table, as I have done during my administration, to be able to work together and produce legislation that is meaningful and productive for the American people. Leadership is a quality that is the beacon of charisma that gives a nation hope in its darkest times. Leadership is what keeps a country stable in its best times. I think that this administration has showed exemplary leadership at home and abroad, at being bipartisan and working across the aisle. I think that for a Republican administration with a Democratic House during our tenure, I think that we have done a fine job. And I will continue to be a president who focuses on leadership if reelected.
Thank you, Mr. Thaddeus. Again, just on time. Mrs. Henderson.
Thank you for the question, Ivor. So there are a number of qualities a president should possess. One of them being leadership, bipartisanship, and a record and passion of uniting people and the country. I have all three of these. On leadership, take the healthcare crisis, for example. I accepted my role in the position. I reached out to Republican senators and the president to help on a new bill, bipartisanship. Every bill that I have passed since I took office in August has had a Republican on it. Every bill that has passed this term, especially, has had a Republican on it. And the last one, a passion and record of unity. Hold on, give me a quick second. Okay, sorry about that. Where was I? Oh, passion and track record for uniting people. Every election that I have won, I've had the support of both Republicans and Democrats. In fact, in my last election, although I was unopposed, the president's running mate endorsed me, and I was proud to have that endorsement. A quote, Andy backs me. So those are the three qualities that a president should possess, and I believe I have those qualities, and I have shown those qualities as well.
Thank you, Mrs.
Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. Just at the same time, Ben. Also, I would ask the candidates to mute themselves if they are not speaking, because echoes may arise and other technical difficulties. And I believe that it is in the interest of the public to, hear what the candidates are saying. Anyway, thank you, candidates, for your answers. Do you have any rebuttals?
Sure. Yes, I would like to talk about. Sorry. Yes, I would like to talk about the issue of bipartisanship, because Monique has been criticized me a couple times. What was the first thing I did on day one as president-elect? I formed a chat with the House Democrats to negotiate a bipartisan tax bill that passed without one nay. What did Monique do in the early days of her House majority? Pass the worst healthcare bill in MEC history, with Ben McKay cajoling, threatening, and deceiving to get that Pride project into law. Take my first day and imagine Monique's first day, raising taxes, increasing inflation, and passing another healthcare disaster. You want a Republican running mate so you can get away with this and not look partisan. That's the way I see it.
So false.
I mean, I'd say, okay.
I assume I can respond now.
Yes.
Yes, you may.
Thank you. So I'm not going to address the healthcare issue anymore. I've made my stance on that clear. The president wants to keep going back to that. He can do that on his own time. As far as why I picked Representative Levine to be my running mate, me and Representative Levine engaged in a policy discussion. We talked about a number of policies, and I realized we agree on a lot more than we disagree on. And his attitude in which I laid out my policies that he may have disagreed on, he took it well. He explained to me his side of things and how we could potentially work together in the House. And I realized that is a person, Representative Levine is a person ready and qualified to be vice president and a person I want by my side on this journey. I did not pick a Republican to gain Republican votes.
Thank you,
In
Monique.
fact,
That's your time. Sorry. Mr. Thaddeus.
Any other rebuttals?
Yeah, sure. So, did you really want Colin, or did you want a Republican? Because as far as I'm aware, you talked to about 7 Republicans if they'd be interested in your running mate position, as far as I'm aware. Now, on the issue of healthcare and that's an important issue that I will go back to, because that is why we're in this economic crisis, because of the balloon spending caused by doubling inflation that has caused this economic disaster. We need to fix that. And with a steady Thaddeus course, we will be able to do that. So that's really all I have to say on that front.
Any other rebuttals?
Yes. So the president, you're right. I did reach out to a number of Republicans. Why? Because I believe that I agree with them on a lot more than we disagree on. For example, all the Republicans I reached out to, except for my running mate, have been Democrats and have been Democrats longer than they have been Republicans. Senator John Lampros and Representative and Senator Matthew Wolfson. Now, as for the other ones, I was kidding around. Those people being the president's running mate, Senator Dominguez and Senator Caleb Karen, who, by the way, did entertain my offer and said he would accept, but he couldn't because he was the RNC chair. Now, if we want to continue to talk about healthcare, Mr. President, I'll indulge you for a second. I'd like to point out that the president supported the first Medicare for All bill under President Fitzgerald.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Henderson, but your time is up. Do I have any other rebuttals?
I mean, okay, I'm well aware of this. I know that your campaign, Sanders' campaign, attacked me heavily on this, and now I'm going to criticize you for it because you supported the Medicare for All bill, and then you supported our Republican proposal, which has been working just fine. It's been doing a great job in reducing our deficit and making our economy work. And it's the Republican Thaddeus Anderson Dominguez proposal that saved this country from the healthcare disaster, not the Universal Healthcare Act. So personally, I really don't see where these attacks come from. We've fixed the issue, and I think that's a good thing for the country. Would you not disagree? It's better for us to get out of this deficit with our fixed healthcare plan.
Well, of course I agree. That's why I was the first and only person who voted for the UHA to come out and say and support its full repeal and to support your bill. Now, back to what I was saying. You supported Medicare for All before in the Senate before you were against it. You supported FitzCare in the Senate before you were against it. You have a long track record of flip-flopping on the issues. Healthcare being the most prominent one, as I just
All right,
out.
so thank you. This was a bit of an open discussion. You will have time to discuss these things. Trust us, you will have time in this very debate. In the terms of moving on, we are truly moving on. So, Ben, take it away.
Yeah. Thank you for your answers. Our second topic will be on the economic, financial, and budgetary issues facing America right now. So this first question goes to Mr. Thaddeus. 39.7 or 12.2 of Americans live in poverty. But for things to be worse, this country has one of the worst child poverty rates in the world. 1 in 5 children live in poverty in the United States. Almost 40% of American kids spend at least 1 year in poverty before they turn 18. I think that all of us can agree that those numbers, real and accurate numbers, are unacceptable. Therefore, what will you do to lower the poverty rate and save American families?
I think that first of all, this comes an issue of addressing where this crisis hits home the worst in rural and urban areas. And Certainly, I think one thing we need to do is we need to be lifting up with people there. We need to be providing affordable housing by lowering prices and creating a cost-competitive market in those areas, getting people off the street into homes, helping rural America. That is exactly what the Thaddeus administration is about. Being from Texas, I am fully can sympathize with the situation going on here with these impoverished communities. I think another issue is, of course, our economy. If the economy improves in America, then it carries the people, carries all of our citizens with it as our nation improves from a stronger economy, which we will hopefully achieve under this Thaddeus administration. As I hope over these next couple of weeks, our economy will continue to improve as inflation is reduced and as our economy significantly improves from the position it was in before. And I'll try not to throw an attack on the economy because I think that this is an issue where there can be a lot of bipartisan work here. And I think that, I would be happy, no matter who becomes president, to work on this issue to achieve a common solution. I think that this is one issue that especially calls for bipartisanship, which is not true for all issues. I think that this is the key issue that we have to deal with here.
Thank you, Mr. Thaddeus. Mrs. Henderson, your response.
Thank you for the question. So there are a number of things that we can be doing. First, I want to commend the governors who have created numerous jobs in their provinces and protected those jobs, such as Governor Davies and Governor Patrick. Now, I've laid out a housing plan to remove barriers to sustainable housing. I've laid out a policy to introduce a Land Revitalization Act, which would clean up our lands, build more houses, more affordable houses at that, fight exploitation by landlords, and work with the Secretary of HUD to invest in and create more affordable housing units. Now, as far as jobs go, because this issue is also about jobs, if you give me a quick second. Okay, sorry. Now back to jobs. I've laid out a plan to eliminate subminimum wage, which allows employers to pay those with disabilities less because of so-called, quote, lower productivity rates. It also allows employers to pay less, to pay those under the age of 20, minimum wage of $4.25, and allows waiters to be paid $2.13. Excuse me. Now these are jobs that are heavily that our teens, 14 through 17, have and are employed with. So eliminating those wages would put more money in those teens' pockets.
Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. You've gone over your time. Your answer. Any rebuttals?
Yes, I'd like a rebuttal.
Okay.
So I don't really know where the president stands there. I don't think the American people know where he stands there either, because he's yet to release his platform. Now, I understand the president is busy being president and the commander in chief and all, but I think it's important for the American people to know where he stands. Now, going based off of the last platform he proposed, he made some policies to help these people and these specific issues, but he also promised to, and I'm quoting him here, he also promised to get in one term his entire 17-page platform done, which again, he's failed tremendously at doing. So, Mr. President, if you could just allow me to ask you, where exactly do you stand on this issue, and what will you do as president?
Thank you, Monique. That's your time.
Yeah, I'd like to respond to that, obviously. First of all, on just quickly addressing the issue of platform, because this is relatively minor, there is an economic crisis in this country. Your own running mate said that it's very understandable that we had to put off some of these plans because of this economic crisis, which, of course, let's abstain from talking about. Now, if you want to talk about the issue of subminimum wage, my running mate, Andrew Dominguez, I hope you're aware of this, was the first to adjust subminimum wage to inflation. So if you want to talk about fighting the good fight and walking the walk instead of talking the talk on the issue of subminimum wage, then please go ahead and talk to my running mate in this ticket about the issue of subminimum wage. Go right ahead.
Well, I'm not talking about adjusting it. I'm talking about eliminating it for the people that it clearly discriminates against. Discrimination against those with disabilities because of, quote, lower productivity rates should not be adjusted to inflation. It should be eliminated. Discriminating against people under the age of 20 should not be adjusted due to inflation. It should be eliminated. Adjusting a $2.13 hourly pay should not be adjusted to inflation. It should be eliminated. Those people work hard. They earn every cent. Their cent should not be adjusted to inflation in regards to sub minimum wage. It should be eliminated across the board to protect those workers and promote those workers and their paychecks.
Any rebuttals? I guess not. We'll move on to the next question. Ivor?
So, currently, the United States is going through an infamous stagflation crisis. Basically, the economy is stagnant while there are high levels of inflation in our currency, the United States dollar. This was largely caused by the budgetary crisis in August and September, which saw the stock market drop quite significantly. As president, what do you believe are the right steps to solve this still ongoing crisis, and how would you convince Congress and the American people of your solution? Ms. Henderson, you go first.
Thank you. So I would do exactly the exact policy that my running mate outlined to the Thaddeus administration when he was being interviewed for Secretary of Treasury to be the Secretary of the Treasury, which, by the way, all these policies were largely ignored. These policies being producing more monetary supply, reducing interest rates, payroll tax cuts, student loan suspensions, cutting taxes, so forth and so on. So as president, I'm going to work with our economic scholars in MEC, being Senator Dominguez, Senator Lampros, and my own running mate, who I hope is the next vice president of the United States. We're going to work with Republicans and Democrats because when it comes to issues like this, bipartisanship is easier to come by, as we've seen with my very own leadership on the healthcare crisis. So that's what I'm going to. Those are the steps I'm going to take as president. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. Mr. Thaddeus.
Monique, I'm afraid you don't understand the economic situation that we're in. Now, all those policies would make sense, perhaps some of them would make sense during a typical recession, but this is stagflation. Inflation is high. What is cutting taxes going to do? What is lowering interest rates going to do? What is all those welfare programs that you highlight all going to do? They're going to increase inflation above 5%. That is going to lead to an economic disaster to the point where all of that money that you're promising back is going to become worthless. Your policies are going to increase inflation when we need to decrease it back down to a stable around 2% increase. If you want to increase monetary supply during a stagflation, that simply has no basis in economic reality, and it is completely and utterly absurd to say that that would be sensible monetary policy.
I assume I can respond to that.
Yeah, go
If
ahead.
Mr. Thaddeus had finished, then you may.
So you're right, Mr. President. Those policies would be for normal recessions. I'd also like to point out, that I worked with your administration to bring this country back from the economic crash. Again, I've stated I largely agree with the steps taken by the administration. I voted for the amendment to the budget and for the proposals and policies that your administration put out, which again, I helped come up with. So my administration would, if in this particular type of recession, when we're battling a stagflation, my administration would largely mirror what the Thaddeus administration has done, simply because I was a part of those negotiations. I agreed with those policies, and I still, to this day, agree with them.
Your time is up, Mr. Henderson.
Mr. Thaddeus, I'm assuming you're having a rebuttal?
Yes. So you've effectively contradicted yourself within two statements. You just said that you would do all these policies that would increase inflation. But here in the Thaddeus administration, we're focusing on contractionary policy to lower the amount of inflation that we have here in the United States, because we're going to have runaway inflation if we continue with these projections. That's why we've had to take all the unfortunate actions we've had to take. But if you want to talk about how to create supply in the economy, we cut restrictions on investment and we increase supply in the economy. We passed the Deregulation Act, the Stagflation Crisis Response Act, and I am positive that we will see strong economic rebounds as the next economic report comes in. I'm very confident in the actions of this administration and how they have affected the economy. But yeah, your policies, on the other hand, would lead to a inflation disaster.
Well, okay. Again, I've stated in my almost 35 campaign speeches that my economic policies would largely be put on hold until we bring this economy back to where it started before you took office. That way we can effectively work to raise paychecks, eliminate sub-minimum wage, and all the other economic policies that I proposed. Again, I just said that I largely agree with, I largely agree with the steps your administration has taken. I was a part of those negotiations, both the budget negotiations, tax negotiations, and the stagflation response negotiations. So I don't understand the point of contention here. If you're talking about the policies I laid out in the first half of the question, I've acknowledged that you were correct. Those policies.
Mr. Henderson, your time has expired. Thank you. I think we're.
If there are no rebuttals, we are going to move on.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'd like to just quickly issue a clarification here. I'm confused by what you mean, because we're not cutting taxes as much as I would like to. We are not creating large welfare programs. We of course had our healthcare plan, which did increase funding for Medicaid and Medicare. But on the issue of you don't cut taxes, you don't increase monetary supply during stagflation. That's the last thing we need to be doing.
Again,
I mean, go ahead. I mean, can we? I mean, I'd love to have an open discussion because I don't understand your point here.
Again, I've stated 3 times now that the policies I laid out in the first half of the question, you are correct. Those policies would be more responsible, more appropriate rather, if we were in a normal recession and not stagflation. I've stated I agree with the policies, proposals, and steps your administration has taken because I was a part of those negotiations. I would not have voted for the 2 bills and proposals if I didn't agree with them. So I don't understand what you're confused on. I've clarified that what you said is correct and that I agree with the steps taken by your administration.
Fantastic. So we both agree on the success of the Thaddeus administration on handling this economic crisis. Great. I think we can move on.
All right. So we are moving on to a unique question for MEC debates. Although the purpose of the First Amendment was the protection of speech, not economic liberty, there are other parts of the Constitution for that matter, it has become an increasingly important provision in our information economy. Many entrepreneurs make businesses out of selling information and the First Amendment, as well as other parts of the Constitution. Therefore, the First Amendment protects commercial speech too, which is a vital facet of economic liberty. So do you believe that, for example, entrepreneurs who publish books, newsletters, software, and other content in such cases should obtain federal licenses? Mr. Thaddeus, you go first.
I think that this is an issue that it isn't really something that the Thaddeus administration would prioritize in terms of our position on this. I think that certainly it's an issue that needs to be looked into. I think it's quite unique to the MEC landscape, and this is certainly something that hasn't really come up in a lot of policies. Perhaps there's been some bills on this, but I actually don't think so. But it's certainly an interesting topic. I don't really see the role of the federal government in really taking a position on this, and I don't think it's really necessary for us to interfere in this. And I don't really care too much for this issue, and this is not a priority the Thaddeus administration would ever really intend to address in a second term. It's not our role. It's not our fight. It's not something we would want to do.
So, for the record, you do not believe that such entrepreneurs should obtain federal licenses?
I think that if a provincial government would be open to creating some sort of provincial license system, I'd be far more comfortable that than a federal license.
All right, so it's a yes. All right, thank you. Mrs.
Yes.
Henderson?
I think, could you quickly restate the question for me, please?
Although the purpose of the First Amendment was the protection of speech, not economic liberty, it has become an increasingly important provision in our information economy. Many entrepreneurs make businesses out of selling information and the First Amendment as well as other parts of the Constitution. Therefore, the First Amendment protects commercial speech as well, which is a vital facet of economic liberty. So, do you believe that, for example, entrepreneurs who publish books, newsletters, software, and other content in such cases should obtain federal licenses?
Absolutely not. Now, I think I agree again with the president here. I'd be more. I think it'd be more appropriate to work with governors on this at the provincial level rather than the federal level.
All right.
So just
no
to, just to
rebuttals?
clarify, you say that. Just to clarify before we go to rebuttals, Tony. Ms. Henderson, you say that you would not. You say you would, quote, absolutely not allow them to have federal licenses, but you also say that it would be delegated to provincial.
Well,
governments.
right. So let me clarify. At the federal level, I have not. I'm going to be honest. I have not really looked into this issue, and like the president said, under a Henderson administration, this would not be a federal priority. I would work now if governors at the provincial level would like to see a program like this. I would absolutely work with them and support them on it.
All right. Well, I assume the Federal Trading Commission will have quite an interesting day tomorrow. No rebuttals? No rebuttals. Ben?
Yes. So our next question goes specifically to Mrs. Henderson, and it's a personal question. Mrs. Henderson, sorry about that. Just give me 1 second. All right. Mrs. Henderson, you sponsored and helped author the Universal Health Care Act as Speaker of the House, which is seen as mostly responsible for the $2.2 trillion deficit revealed by a report by the CBO. How can the American taxpayer expect you to be fiscally responsible when you were one of the main architects of one of our nation's biggest financial burdens in its history?
Well, thank you for the question. First, I want to clarify. I did not. I had no part in writing the UHA. However, I did sponsor it and vote for it. Now, as for whether voters can trust me, again, during the debate over whether this should pass, especially during a lame duck session, I laid out not one, not two, but 3 plans to better finance this, which have been acknowledged by almost every member, everyone present at that debate, including the president's running mate. I've agreed publicly that there were flaws with the Universal Health Care Act. However, there are flaws with every bill that come out of Washington, D.C. Become kind of a tradition. But I laid out plans to better finance it because I did disagree with it. After it passed, I reached out to Senator Wolfson, then Senator Representative Wolfson, Senator Dominguez, and Senator Karen to create a bipartisan way to better finance this. I also talked to the president. Me and Senator Karen had a long and lengthy discussion. However, his inactivity and his break prevented that from happening. So voters can trust me because when I'm wrong, I get back to work. I accept my mistakes, and I get to work to fix it, which the president has said doesn't show leadership. But if that doesn't show leadership, I don't know what does.
All right. Thank you for your answer, Monique. Also, another personal question to Mr. Thaddeus. Mr. Thaddeus, you and your party still haven't gotten a universal healthcare system, which you have been critiqued about. So what do you plan to do about the grave issue of healthcare with your party's majority in both chambers of Congress?
Everyone is covered under the Health Care and Voucher Act that was passed under the Republican Congress and this administration. Because it's simple, look, we have a voucher system for those who cannot afford healthcare. We are able to provide an immense credit for them to be able to afford healthcare. And we provide a affordable and effective government option that is able to provide for our almost any citizen who would like to seek healthcare. And of course, we allow and re-legalize private healthcare in this country and reintroduced a perfectly fine sector that some people can attempt to purchase insurance from, or if they do not like that, they can purchase insurance from the government, or if they can't afford either, they get their government voucher. This is an issue where we basically have a universal healthcare system where everyone is covered. It's just not the system that Monique proposed or supported, being the Universal Healthcare Act. And I'm very, very proud of Anderson Care. I think that Logan and our team wrote a fantastic bill, and Andrew too was on the front lines of that fight. Many, many great Republican lawmakers were able to write that fantastic bill, which replaced disaster that came before it.
If I could respond to that quickly.
I'm sorry, there aren't rebuttals for the personal questions.
Okay.
Another personal question. Mr. Thaddeus, the recently passed Emergency Supplemental Stability Act, written by you and your running mate, where you, although you didn't pledge to, cut Social Security benefits by a net of $90 billion, otherwise stated as $1,000 per beneficiary. Why did you break your campaign promise written in your platform to not cut Social Security? And how can all those Americans and their families who hardly get by trust you with their benefits?
Because the Social Security budget was amended illegally. You cannot reform entitlement spending in a budget. That's not at all how the system works. And you can talk to Andrew, and you can talk to anyone who understands budgets about that. Look, on the issue of Social Security, you're simply not allowed to reform entitlements by just changing a number on the budget. That's not how it works. You have to go through a long process of writing a bit comprehensive legislation that would be able to do such a thing. So this issue that we've cut Social Security is really a misleading term, right? We have corrected the mistakes of those who wrote the bill illegally and simply did not know the law and broke the law by making the budget, reforming entitlements in the budget, which is simply not allowed. So, look, on this issue, I think that it's quite clear that the Thaddeus administration, though it might not be popular, is standing by the law. And once we get out of this economic crisis, I'd be happy to work on an entitlement reform that would be able to uphold those promises that I made.
For the record, the stated act was the Emergency Supplemental Stability Budget Act. That is not the governmental financial plan as that was passed, because that is the budget. This was an emergency supplemental financial appropriation. So technically, in those appropriations, one may, if agreed by Congress and signed by President, make such actions. Mrs. Henderson, no, wait, Ben, please.
Yes. Mrs. Henderson, another personal question for you. Your own running mate voted for the Emergency Supplemental Stability Budget Act, yet you have run aggressively against these kinds of cuts and policies. Additionally, you have not even voted on that legislation. So where do you really stand on the matter, and what would you do differently if you were in the president's position?
Thank you. So me and Colin agree here. I would have abstained the bill for reasons cited, but correct me if I'm wrong. If I didn't vote on it, my apologies to my constituents and to the federal government. So one, I do not support cutting Social Security, especially when those most vulnerable are in dire need of those benefits, especially by $90 billion. Come on, $90 billion. Furthermore, I've stated my somewhat support for the budget, but I would have abstained, again, due to reasons cited. If I was in the president's position, we would not be cutting $90 billion from Social Security, from seniors, especially from those seniors who need it the most, especially in this time.
Yes, I'll just follow up on that. You said you and your running mate were in agreement, yet your running mate, Representative Levine, voted in favor of that Supplemental Stability Budget Act, and yet you say you're against it. So I'm just
Well,
wondering, where do you stand?
the overall premise of it, I support, but it's the details for me, such as cutting Social Security by $90 billion.
But how do you agree then?
Because we both support the premise of it. It's just the details for me personally that were lacking, which is why I would have abstained on it.
Okay, so you
But
and your
your
own
voting record, never
Yeah.
mind. Well, the records and the facts will be, I'm sure, discussed by both campaigns afterwards. We are moving on. So currently, the national debt sits at $22.4 trillion, United States dollars, and I think it is fair to say that it is a burden which the government will have to face at some point in the future, whether that be now or an even bigger sum for future generations to bear. As president, what would be your specific and detailed plan to address the national debt crisis we are experiencing right now? Mrs. Henderson, you are going first.
If you could hold off on that, I have a technical issue which I cited earlier.
I guess this is kind of a commercial break.
Yeah.
We'll be putting elevator music.
Although
Don't worry.
there are no commercial breaks.
Sure.
There are no commercial breaks in real life debates, but
It's Soviet help.
this is an unprecedented situation for that matter. What did you say?
You can't see.
Mrs. Henderson, are you back? Mrs. Henderson, are you by any chance back?
My apologies, I'm back.
All right. Thank you for the music, Mr. Dominguez. Mrs. Henderson, it's your time to answer the question.
Thank you. So, correct me if I'm wrong. The question is about reducing the national debt.
It is.
Thank you. So, there are a number of things that we could do. One, again, I would look into establishing the so-called Robin Hood tax on Wall Street speculators. We'd end tax brackets for, there are a lot of plans here, so excuse me. End tax brackets for subsidies for big oil, gas, and coal companies. Stop corporations from using offshore tax havens to avoid U.S. taxes. We'd strengthen our corporate inversion laws, tax capital gains and dividends the same as work, repeal all of the 2001 and 2003 tax cuts for the top 2%, which I believe has been done, so pardon that. Eliminate the cap on taxable income that goes into the Social Security trust fund. Establish a currency manipulation fee on China and various other countries. Reduce unnecessary and wasteful spending at the Pentagon and in the Department of Defense, which I've been very stern on. and require Medicare to negotiate for lower prescription drug prices with the pharmaceutical industry. So there are a number of things now. I haven't gone through all of them because I have a large array of policies for this. There are a number of things that we can do, a number of things that a Henderson administration would do. So those are the top 9. I believe I named 9 things that my administration would do. But again, there are a lot of things that the federal government could be doing right now and that a Henderson administration would prioritize in doing.
Thank you for your answer.
Mr. Thaddeus?
This is an issue we need stability on. Now, of course, for many, many seasons, the United States federal government ran surpluses. Unfortunately, those surpluses were based off false and misleading past budgets that have started ever since the beginning of season 12, and I'm very proud that this administration corrected it. I'd rather write a deficit but an honest budget than a surplus and basically a fake budget with fluff numbers. So I'm very proud of what we've done here. Now, as long as we can run a stable debt to GDP ratio, then we should remain mostly in the clear on this issue of debt and not making sure that we balloon. Modest deficits are okay, especially in strong economies. I'm a fiscal conservative, but that's simply a point of economic reality. Now, of course, we should strive for balanced budgets, but that's an issue, of course, where we cannot afford to cut back on spending all too much. I think a good example of this, cutting back on spending too much, is the Thaddeus administration has already reduced defense spending to $400 billion. If Monique wants to cut that even more into the 300s, I would get concerned for the stability of the national security of the United States if we maintain such a small and underfunded military. That would be my concern there, as well as raising taxes. I will not raise taxes, and I will not make further deep cuts to, I would say, any department or any branch of discretionary spending. Of course, I think that modest changes here and there, eliminating wasteful spending, is a fairly agreeable concern. But I don't think that I think we're on a steady course right now that we've corrected our budget, and it's a system that's working, and I think it'll continue to work, and I hope it will work for many seasons to come.
Any rebuttals?
If I could just further explain one of the policies.
Sure.
Okay, so establishing a currency manipulation fee on China and other countries. The Economic Policy Institute, which a lot of my campaign numbers come from, has estimated that we could raise approximately $500 billion over the next 10 years and create 1 million jobs. I'll be laying out that full policy later after the debate. Just wanted to clarify on that.
All right. Any other rebuttals, follow-ups?
Yeah. I just want to say that on the issue of negotiating with providers to lower prices, this has already been done under Thaddeus era healthcare legislation, and I think it's a great accomplishment of the Thaddeus administration. I hope that would be the 5th or 6th thing that Monique has agreed with me tonight on the fantastic work of our administration.
Rebuttals?
Yes. Actually, I have a question. Well, not a question, just a quick statement. So under my administration, we'd require Medicare to negotiate drug prices similarly to what the VA currently does. But under my, we'd save about $240 billion over 10 years. Again, that number comes from the Economic Policy Institute. Mr. President, I'm curious to know the numbers of your healthcare plan.
Well, are you asking how much it would save? First of all, I just want to say on the issue of drug pricing, that's already something that the Thaddeus administration has done in its healthcare legislation. We do have effective means of lowering drug prices and making those effective negotiations that will reduce the cost. Are you asking me about how much our plan saved? Because it obviously saved hundreds of billions of dollars when compared to the previous system, which was obviously wrong by a fair bit, only $865 billion. Which we corrected to a fairer amount that was much less harmful to the United States deficit and provided better health care just in general.
Follow-ups? No follow-ups?
I don't think
All
so.
right. So thank you, candidates, for your answers on this topic of budgetary, financial, economic issues facing the country. Now we are moving on to our last topic tonight, and it's a It's a very interesting topic, domestic issues facing the internal structure of the United States of America. This basically encompasses all subjects ranging from immigration to agriculture, and since we have mentioned agriculture, it is only right to start with agriculture. Although many find it boring, it is an extremely important part of our country, of our culture, of our life and economy. Farmland values, as well as cash rents in agriculture, have experienced falling trends during most of the latest presidential terms, not just here but in real life, as we had a continuation of such policies. And that has been the case especially because of new ecological standards imposed by previous administrations. Do you think that this is a positive trend, and what would you do about it, Mr. Thaddeus?
I think that when it comes to the issue of regulations, of course, we have many necessary ones, but I think that's certainly something that the Thaddeus administration would want to look into is cutting those regulations that are killing the farming industry, killing agriculture. I think that if we really want to talk about supporting rural America, not just say the slogan that has been said for days and days, we actually have to do something about the issue. We have to cut down on regulations on those issues that have been hurting farmers, increasing those poverty rates in rural areas and making those farmers lose their jobs. I would be interested to see what Monique's proposal on unnecessary regulations on farmers are as well, from the many pieces of legislation that I'm sure that she would agree for the most part with.
All right, just for it to be on the record, we were talking about farmland values as well as cash rents, not necessarily regulations, because we were talking about standards imposed rather than regulations as mechanisms. Mrs. Henderson? Mrs. Henderson?
Yeah, sorry for the delay. So I want to answer the president's question. I agree on eliminating useless and dangerous regulations for across the board, small businesses, farmers, so on and so forth. Pertaining to the question, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe farmland values or agriculture was mentioned in it.
Obviously farmland value is agriculture.
Right. I just wanted to make sure that's what I heard. So in my platform, it clearly states that my administration will reject policies that hurt American farmers. We will secure and protect timely and adequate disaster relief for our farmers, federally fund programs that reward farmers who use conservation methods, and dedicate $560 million for research and innovative ways to further decarbonize the agricultural industry, and support and propose legislation that supports funds and uplifts American and Latino farmers. These are just some of the steps my administration will take. And again, I'm curious to know the president's policies, because again, we have no platform. And I don't believe these policies are mentioned in his previous platform either.
All right. Any rebuttals on these matters?
I guess.
All right. If not, then the fun begins.
Yes, the fun does begin right here, everybody.
Right here, right now.
We have a personal question for Mrs. Henderson.
Actually, a couple of them.
Yes, a couple for both candidates. Mrs. Henderson, during one of your recent rallies in Yuma, Arizona, you remarked that you would, quote, work with other nations and their governments to safely return folks who don't meet the standards set by your administration. Yet, in the Democratic primary debate, you pledged to, quote, decriminalize immigration. How are you going to be able to decriminalize immigration when you are simultaneously detail a set of standards which would further regulate the path for criminal action of deportation?
Thank you for the question. So these are two different things. Decriminalizing immigration. Now, let me say this: if you're an illegal immigrant and you come undocumented immigrant, I'll use that term instead, and you come to the country, we are a country of values. We are a country of laws. I believe that. If you do not meet those laws, if you have a dangerous history or a criminal record, I'm sorry, but as president, I will not put American citizens at that risk. Now, as far as decriminalizing immigration goes, we need to focus those resources on real security threats, such as terrorism, especially home and abroad. So again, those are two totally different things. Setting standards for the safety and security of American citizens and decriminalizing migration, in my opinion, just don't go hand in hand.
Yes, but could you just clarify what you mean by decriminalization of immigration, just to separate the two?
Oh, sure. So I don't think coming into a country for a better life should be a criminal offense. I think we should direct that to immigration courts, and it should be a civil offense as outlined in my platform. Now, again, that's if I wasn't clear in my platform, that's what I mean by decriminalizing immigration. And I will put the security, health, and safety of American citizens first. If I am elected as America's president, that's what we're going to do.
All right, thank you for that response and clarification. Now, a personal question for Mr. Thaddeus. Mr. Thaddeus, you haven't been too active on the immigration policies. However, we are now offering you a chance to constructively state your views on the Henderson proposals and offer alternative views and plans if you agree with her.
Ben, I don't know if you checked Congress or my recent bill signings, but we just signed an immigration bill into law. We just made it easier to get a visa for travel and free movement around North America, as well as making sure that we remain vigilant on the border security issue and make sure that we can reduce the amounts of illegal immigration in the United States. I think that is a fairly agreeable issue, that people should be coming here legally instead of illegally through illegal border crossings. But we made it easier to obtain visas. We've made I think a great strides in American immigration policy. And I hope that the American Immigration and Safety Act will be here to stay, co-written by myself, Mr. Andrew Dominguez, Senator John Lampros, and Representative Ethan Davis. So I hope that you check that out.
What Ben Polifel said was too active, as he referenced your entire.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No one denied the existence of.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm very sorry.
And also, just to give you a quick second, because what we are trying to get your view on what Mr. Henderson is proposing. So, what is your opinion on that? And please be brief.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I misheard what Ben said. On the issue of MEC's proposals, I think that it's a fair proposal that we shouldn't be treating immigration as a crime. However, I still think that it's important to make sure that we uphold the laws of this country, make sure that issues of illegal immigration we remain vigilant on, But all in all, I think that the Thaddeus proposal is a better proposal than the one that we've worked on, and I would be very.
Wait. Can I just follow up on your response there? You said that you somewhat agree with Ms. Henderson's proposal on decriminalizing immigration, yet you proposed staying vigilant on immigration laws. What does that look like? Both of those things happening simultaneously.
I think that, well, first of all, I do think that I think that on the issue of decriminalizing immigration, right? I don't think that we should make it I don't think that it's perhaps, well, I take that back, actually. I think that crossing the border illegally is a crime. That's certainly a difference of the campaign. However, I don't agree with locking people up or putting them up in inhumane conditions that we've seen in real life during the Trump administration. That I do not agree with. So perhaps when I say decriminalizing, I should say dehumanizing the issue of arresting immigrants. That's my bad. I will issue a correction there.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Thaddeus. Now we'll move on to a personal question for Mr. Thaddeus. Mr. Thaddeus, in a policy memo, your campaign stated that, quote, Roman loves guns. going on to bring up your advocacy for a national holiday for wrongly convicted firearm bearers, saying that these firearm bearers were quote unquote arrested because their governments don't want them owning a weapon. Given your apparent exuberance for firearms, how can American families who have been affected by rapid gun violence entrust you to keep their children and communities safe?
I think that can be entrusted with common sense gun policy, which we have kept under the Thaddeus gun laws. We have kept national background checks, and again, we haven't completely on the regulations that we have repealed. We've let the states regulate those so that they know, because they know